Here.
Here. Here.
All approve, say aye.
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 Not approve, same sign. Motion pass. Today we have with us, well, he was in the room. Moving on to the second or the fourth item of business today, we wanted to update the zone board on some issues with transition. What was that? Okay. Okay. I'm going to have Bob Henderson's going to join us, the county IT director, to talk a little bit about the transition the zone is going to be making in early 2023 from using mainly our Cass County tenant of Teams and transitioning over to the state tenant, as well as the state nd.gov email address. And some of that data migration process, it's becoming very evident that we need to move forward with that, in that our different departments, right now, currently economic assistance is much of what they use within the state system is in the state SharePoint, so we need to be toggling back and forth. So we've been working with the county IT, and we have a great partnership, and I appreciate that partnership, to help guide us moving forward. And we will also be working with our state partners with the data migration project and their SharePoint project for family services, for adult protective services, and ultimately, hopefully it will clean up the way we interact with our state partners and our county partners. So I'm going to have Bob and probably Heather a little. We put together a pilot team here at the zone to start working on this with representation from all of our departments as well as admin, because it is going to be a heavy lift for everybody and much our partners with county IT. And we appreciate the time Bob and his team is putting into it and the guidance. So I'm going to let you take over a little bit, Bob, and kind of explain it a little further.
Thank you. So what we are finding is as the Department of Human Services has transitioned over to a zone-based environment, it was more difficult for environments such as Cass County that had a large amount of infrastructure already in place to have to pivot away from all of that infrastructure quickly to use the state support system. For smaller zones that probably didn't have these systems in place or only had a couple employees that would be impacted, it's a much easier lift. However, here we've got 200 plus employees that we need to worry about. It's an entirely different level of scale. Here in Cass County, we always have designed our systems to be as easy as possible to use with as quickly as we can to access county systems. The downfall we have now is our human service zone friends here are no longer accessing county systems, but are now accessing the state of North Dakota's systems as default. Our system was not designed for that to go through, and to recreate that environment, we would have effectively have to break everyone else in Cass County for one department's needs. In alleviation of that, we have decided to effectively, and I use these words very tentatively because it is not the meaning you might jump to, but we are effectively breaking a section off of our IT resources specifically for the zone so that we can treat them according to the zone's requirements without impacting the rest of Cass County. This makes us basically double up in many cases. We're going to have a zone environment and a Cass County environment. My staff will now have to be maintaining double the servers, double the infrastructure, double quite a few things, so that our human service zone can have the easiest to use process they can have while not impacting the rest of Cass County. It's a large, heavy lift, as Gail was saying, especially the initial setup. We are effectively building a new system from the ground up to support our zone. Once it is in place, the workload does go down as we're just doing the same thing twice instead of having to do completely different things all of the time. But it is effectively a double up. However, we do feel with our existing resources, automation, and tooling, we should be able to absorb this with having no impact on our staff with the current needs of the state of North Dakota. If that does change, we'll have to reevaluate this process. As Gail and Heather and crew can attest, we don't get a lot of say in what we're told to do. We just end up having to do it anyways. Where this comes into play is we have to touch every single device at our human service zone and effectively move them to this new environment manually. This will be a large lift and requiring a large amount of my team, probably some after hours and evenings work, so that we can have the minimal impact on the day-to-day activities as possible. One other thing we're going to have to figure out as we move forward is sort of where this line ends up stopping. When we have some of our services transitioning over to shared phone systems through Teams for the state, it starts adding up questions of, does the county still put desk phones on people's desks if they have to use Teams for everything? The list goes on and on. That's just a great example that we will be working with Human Service Zone to figure that out as we go. Now, one thing I want to reiterate is we are not treating this as second-class citizens or anything in that way. Our people at our Human Service Zone, our county employees, they will be treated to the same level of support, resources, and access as anything else. We just want to make sure that their use cases are thought of in their way as well, so we're not making it fit with everything. I can go further into technical detail if there's any questions, but the big setup there is we will be transitioning to a separate but equal kind of environment for our Human Service Zone, and this will be a large lift for us, but after it's all through, we should be in a better situation for both teams.
Rick?
So, Bob, just give me an example. So I'm an employee of the zone. How does it impact me directly? What am I going to be doing differently?
Right now, if you are a human or a member of the zone, you log into your computer as your Cass County account. That logs into your SharePoint, that logs into your Teams, all of that stuff. That works great until you have to go into the nd.gov tenant. So you have to log out of all these processes, log into the other one. And then 20 minutes later, you need to check your Cass County email. So you log out again and you hop back. And it's a continuous back and forth hopping that's been very impactful. With this new system, they will log in with a new human service account that doesn't log them in by default to anything else. They can choose to use the nd.gov. They can choose to use their Cass County. It will be impactful only to them and their choice. It really is going to be a nice, smoother environment. And hopefully, as time goes on, we can make some of those defaults available as more of our zone transitions over to the nd.gov.
I have a question about that. So my question would be, as an employee, is there parts of the Cass County system that they need to keep up, like enter data? I'm just going to use case notes as an example. Entering case notes in Cass County. Now, are they going to have to do it twice? In Spaces and Cass County? No.
So it should be none of that at the current moment, and we are working to transition a large amount of that data over to the state tenant as soon as it is available and ready. State is still building those rules for us, so we're sort of, building the plane as we're flying it, to use Robert's saying. It has been a little bit frustrating because they tell us to do this and we have to figure it out. And I don't think they understood simply how much data Cass County has. We are great at storing everything, probably 3 or 4 times in some cases.
Probably too much.
And we have not been able to fully sort through that. So there is millions of documents that will have to be migrated across. I don't know if state's ready, but they told us in an email, in writing, that it's infinite storage. Just throw all you need in there. So we're gonna.
I got a question too. So basically, instead of logging in and out for 2 systems, you'll toggle back and forth basically without logging in and out, is that what you're saying?
If they still have to access both systems, they will still have to log in and out. The issue we have currently is our CAS system is designed that when you log into a CAS service, it single signs in the rest of it all the way up the stack, in the SharePoint, in the Teams, all of that by default. This is designed for our end users, so they only have to log in once to access all the resources. Now we have to access a different company effectively's resources, so you have to toggle. This will not force them by default, but if they still have to log into a CAS system, which they will for things such as UKG, our HRIS system, they will still have to toggle at that setup there. But their new default effectively is going to be ND-Gov, so we're not forcing them into ours.
Because a lot of times the IT on the other side, they'll write an interface, so they're basically, you can basically click on this one and this one, but, so at some point, will it be one system in the end? Is that what they're trying to get to? So you don't have the county and the state?
You know, if you ask the state, I think they would have a different answer than I would. We do enjoy our local control here at Cass County, as well as many other counties. I don't see the state of North Dakota taking on all of the IT resources for all political subdivisions.
And, you know, personally, I would not see that as a positive movement for the zone. Strictly looking at something more for our team members. Right now, just for example, I log in with my Cass County ID, logged in. I monitor 2 email boxes, both nd.gov and Cass County. So you monitor those, and I have 2 separate calendars. It took me about a little while to realize I was missing some because I didn't know I had that nd.gov calendar out there. And more of our data, both administratively, some things related to our payroll that we have to report up now is on that state tenant of SharePoint. So we have to do that, more and more of that. And the reason why, my understanding and my lack of technical mind here is some of that is now related to retention records. That state SharePoint, all the data put in there and documents will be have a retention linked to it, so it will just be disposed of by that record. So that's some of that. Our EA team currently has switched over to that in the kind of the back way of doing that. So they're to email team members there, I have to try to remember I should email their nd.gov email address because that's the email that they're monitoring more often because of redesign, which will kick off next Monday on that.
A big change to your point there, sir, is if this was like a business acquisition or something, and we had absorbed another agency, usually at that point, you have control of both sides of the environment and can have an interface develop between. We do not have control of the other side here. And some of the requirements that exist with the interface revolve around giving up a large amount of control, which is something that would impact many other parts of Cass County. So we still have further discussions with NDIT on what this looks like as time goes on. However, this seems to be the best foot forward for us at this point for both Cass County and our human service zone employees.
Bob, you and I and Gail have had a number of conversations about this leading up to this, and we're going to have a similar conversation with the commission this afternoon. A thought that just occurred to me is that I think you have a well thought out plan for what the requirements are now and what they're going to be. Is there something that worries you that if the goalpost gets moved to here rather than here, that something that would really cause you problems that you hadn't anticipated?
We can never know what our legislation is going to do from funding, appropriations, and so on. This is a large-scale lift that the Department of Human Services is taking under, and I have not seen a roadmap that fully funds it out past our existing biennium. My worry is, for some reason, this entire system stumbles and falls on its face, and we are scrambling to bring this back. The benefit to that from us is we are still going to maintain a human service zone specific environment. If the state tenant was to disappear for whatever reason, it would not be fun, but we could get us back in operational in a timely manner because we are maintaining that environment for our users. Our key is to make sure when our citizens walk through that front door, they can get their service. And that is what we're maintaining here in the event things did go up or upside down, they can still have that level of confidence.
And this has been a project since I onboarded January 2022. So Bob is exactly right. Some smaller zones and counties probably did not have the infrastructure or the teams, any of that technology. So it was easy to adopt into this because it just works slick. And, you know, as the largest zone, in the state, and we have a good infrastructure here. The county provides a lot of great support in IT. It is a different lift here, but it is needed, I think, just for our team members, for all of us to get on the same tenant, so we're not missing documentation. It has been pretty evident in economic assistance, and it will start being more evident in family services because they're setting up those, what's that, team?
Document library.
Yeah, document libraries, that's the correct term. That team members will have to access that for foster care licensing to check out. They already have to do that, so it's just, we need to start moving forward. So we put together a team, and Bob has been very supportive.
I was just gonna say,
Carrie?
so I totally agree with you in terms of small counties across the state of North Dakota, that's not being a bad thing for them, it's being a good thing for them, and larger counties and larger places in our state that serve a lot more people are having a more difficult time with things. So having said that, and knowing that, does Cass County get extra anything to make this happen?
Cass County does not get extra anything, and I believe that is primarily due to our scope and scale. They effectively use the rest of the state as, for lack of a better term, the testing environment. And when it works there, they assume it's going to work here as well. To me, that is opposite. Coming from my background, which was education in the Minnesota system, I would always look at things and they started with Hennepin County, and if it worked in Hennepin, it would work elsewhere. We take the opposite stance. We have learned to rely heavily upon Cass County's abundant resources, our highly technical staff, our great zone directors, and everything else to make it work. I don't like having that answer always be our default, but it has yet to make us stumble. And in event of anything does happen, I have no doubt that we can make this work. It may not be as efficient as it could have been, but I believe we could say that about every government project, and that is just how it works.
Oh, I should watch up there if there's any question. Robert?
If you had to quantify the number of Cass County IT work hours required to meet this zone and DHS requirement, what would that ballpark look like?
That one I would really have to do anything off the top of the head. We're looking at 500 to 600 hours at the very least, and that really depends on how many of that can be done after hours. We are taking this with a grain of salt and with some happiness, however. My staff really have never had the chance to build an environment from scratch. Usually these things have been in place, like ours, since the early 2000s. So they have never had a chance to do this, so it's a great training opportunity for them. So that's the way we're approaching it. They get to learn something new every day.
We love your attitude.
Dan?
Just a quick question, transition timeframe?
Current time frame is based upon testing. I'm allowing my staff to really stumble and learn how to do this on their own and not really pushing them. I'm giving them till probably end of February to really get to that happy medium before they'll get some more aggressive direction. At that point, it'll come down to scheduling. I'm hoping that no later than mid-May, we should have the majority moved over, barring any unexpected surprises or other projects coming up to take resources.
We have meetings scheduled with the data migration person at the state too, starting, that got pushed back till next week, I think. So of course, we'll have IT involved in those as well as representation from each of the departments as we move forward. But those data libraries are built out the same, my understanding, for every zone across the state. So it's got that consistency.
And that's really where this project is designed for, not only at Cass, but it is so that the entire zone across the entire state can work in the same system, same format, same everything. As we've said a couple times, Cass County has solved a lot of these problems. So instead of having to follow our process existing, we are allowing state to effectively recreate the wheel in the way they would like to sometimes. But at the end, everyone will follow the same set of rules.
Ultimately, for team members of the zone, to have a single environment will be very helpful. Maybe August we'll be feeling a little better, by all of that, but it's going to be a big transition, and it has been a big transition in EA to get ready for redesign on Monday. That strictly is in the ND.gov tenant. Trainings, all of that has been there. Any other questions, or from those online, joining us online, any questions? If not, thank you, Bob, for your time and your support. Next on the agenda is the director's report, and I handed that out fairly short from the last, since we just met in January. Just included a picture there, and Brian was able to attend, as well as Robert. On Tuesday, the 24th, we recognized 22 team members who reached different service milestones from 3 years to 30 years with Cass County, or Cass Human Service Zone. So we had just a quick breakfast and recognition. I thought that went very well. We continued discussion with Robert and Jean with the county, as well as TR Stroh, about the annex update plan. And really that kind of come up with now phase 1, which would be lighting and paint in offices and general spaces, not the lobby areas, of all the zone area in the annex, kind of as phase 1, and possibly the security of the main door, the main entrance door on the north side, to secure that both, right now it's left, the outer door is unlocked, and you can access the elevator after hours, or before hours by going in, and there's a card key access in that. But for safety and security, we have had team members come across people that maybe find that as a nice warm place during the cold evenings, so that will be addressed also in that first phase. And we are working with Jean to come up with a plan. Yes, it will be a little cumbersome for offices and people housed in offices to move our stuff. But we're gonna start on 4th floor just because there's a lot of vacant offices up there, get those all done, and then we can move people up or down for that period of getting that painted. And then the LED lighting will have, everybody will have a dimmer switch, so I think that will be helpful for offices, and then maybe move into some signage. Robert, do you have anything more to add on that?
Thank you. I guess the only thing I would add is I felt like we really had kind of a breakthrough at our last meeting with Terry Stroh, where we really came up with a plan of all the things that we've talked about potentially doing as part of this project. It quite frankly, it's a bit of an overwhelming task related to the budget we have. And so I think with your direction of what was most important, I think we've got a good schedule of activities of what we can realistically complete time-wise and budget-wise in 2023, but then would also have a better roadmap moving forward beyond that the commission can consider as recommendations as part of budgeting in future years. So I felt like it was really a bit of a breakthrough on the last meeting that we had.
Any questions, comments? If anybody's been up there, some paint goes a long ways, and it will really make a difference, as well as lighting, I think. And I think for team members, I think that will be great to have. Just included in there was out for a director's meeting in the beginning part of January, and had some updates from economic assistance with redesign, as well as Corey Peterson with family services. And then we worked on some legislative priorities and work groups. I was out in Bismarck really towards the beginning of the session, and listened in to mainly on the Senate bill. I listed some of the priorities. There's a lot more bills that the Zone Directors Association is kind of tracking, and they ensure to have people out there sitting in either in hearings or committee work. the first Monday through Wednesdays of the week. But House Bill 1046, these ones I thought you might also want to maybe look at, or I will reach out if I need some guidance or input. 1046 relates to the zone kind of cleanup bill. So from the original bill related to direct and indirect costs and payments. Of course, since we're a single county zone, there's some issues, and I questioned this from day one. Like, I would hear like, okay, paper for the copy machine. Well, we're pretty separated. We know that we're using the copy machine, but other zones, that's an indirect cost. In my head, that didn't make if I'm buying 10 cases of paper, I know the zone is using it. So they're cleaning up some of that type of language related to direct costs and indirect costs and agreements and plans. And then there's some language in there about the creation, or if a zone, say, host county wants to change to a different county. Some of those things weren't in the original bill, so the language is getting updated. Of course, that doesn't really affect us because Cass is our host county, as it's the only county. House Bill 1091 is related to,
You know,
okay.
A question on that. So what if a neighboring county wanted to say, no, we want to become part of the Cass County zone? So it could affect us. Maybe. I'm just curious because. we have some
That they'd
small
have to
counties.
be a host, that we would be their host county. I don't know, I haven't read it in that way.
I'm just
I
curious if
didn't-
it doesn't affect us, like, yeah.
Yeah, it could, yeah,
And yeah, maybe, but,
yeah.
or do we have
More-
the right of first refusal and say, nope, we want to be our own? I'm just,
They wrote language in there, and I can't, Rick,
Okay.
I can't come up the top of my head. I haven't looked at it recently to see what has been updated on that. But it was language about changing host counties. So I will look at that. Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
so you mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah. 1091's related to foster care for children, licenses, certifications, and approvals, kind of related to kinship relatives, making that available where not necessarily have to go, you can make a kinship placement, and that kinship would not necessarily have to be a licensed facility to get reimbursed for that support of placing a child there. So that these are all in the beginning, and to be honest, I haven't looked in the last week of any of the updates because I've been out of the office. Yep.
On that kinship relatives that could handle the foster care, would there still be site visits to the kinship until they are confident that everything's okay?
My understanding, kinship placements are in lieu, they follow the same guidelines. We would have a case management. Foster care licensing is a state unit, but they wouldn't have the same licensure, but there would still be that guidance where we would maybe have somebody checking on that child, of course. We have those same guidelines. Senate Bill 2012, that's the one I sat in mainly out there. It's the appropriations bill for Health and Human Services. Of course, they kind of did the week I was out there, every department within Health and Human Services presented their budget and their overview and provided a report. So there's a lot of good testimony in there to read. Was good questions, I thought, when Kristen Hasbargen presented on the human service zones. So that is a one we will also watch. Senate Bill 2139 is related to indigent burial and final disposition of bodies. That's another one we're watching too, because there's some language in there, and that's through Human Services, related to a unified cost of $3,500. Cremation, we did bring up as a Zone Directors Association that because of cultural or religious, not preferences, but needs, not everybody can be cremated. And we experience that here in our zone. So that's a bill that we are watching. As well as 2087, the TANF bill. And I bet Carrie's kind of watching that also. So do you have any update? I didn't get a chance to look at it, but it's
Everything they're asking for so far has been well
well
received, I
received.
feel.
Yeah,
You know, time will tell, but definitely the Health and Human Services Subcommittee is, behind it completely. And it'll be refreshing to see some of those changes come through, the benefit cap baby thing going away and increase in TANF amounts. And another piece of TANF that's really negatively impacted caseloads over the last decade probably has been pay after performance, which does not have to be a part of legislation. That is something that can be changed without legislative approval. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that too will
Yeah.
change, because as you know, TANF caseloads have dropped to just a mere fraction of what they once were in this county and across the state. And though these changes aren't going to build those caseloads back up fast or greatly, hopefully it will be more of a safety net for families that it should be. And so,
yeah.
so far
I
it's been warmly
expect-
received.
Yeah.
A quick question on it. So what are the two top things that are really advantageous for your area as far as helping people? The
As far as-
positives?
Increasing the TANF amount will be helpful. I mean, right now, what is it,
333.
Yeah. Not even $350 a month. And when somebody can go find a job at McDonald's paying $17 an hour and make that, and you guys are probably better at math than I am, in no time at all, right? Why on earth would they come to TANF where they're gonna say, you have to also go participate with job service and participate for either 20 or 30 hours a week in a work type activity, whether it's training or volunteer work or whatever, to be engaged, when they can go work a couple days at McDonald's and get that money right there. So that will probably be a big thing that will help improve it. So, and then, they want to, and I don't know that I fully understand this piece, but a lot of federal TANF dollars are used to fund other programs in our state. And not necessarily to fund those grants for TANF families or the training and services that those TANF families get, but for other programs across our state. And they're gonna pull that money back into TANF, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, so they have to figure that out.
Which I'm not
But I
sure.
think there's TANF money that goes into child welfare,
Yes, there
is
is.
where that's going. So,
Just a question, it seems like there's a theme on a number of these bills of sort of aligning costs to where the responsibilities lie, or properly aligning those costs and resources. I know it's late in the game for substantive changes, but has there been any talk of building in the IT and the technology costs that, for conversion, that we just talked about a few minutes ago into some of these bills? Could be, I mean, it could be a stretch. We're getting, again, late into the session, but it certainly seems like it could be a worthwhile.
as the director of CAS, Human Service Zone, I have not provided that, because the Directors Association usually compiles that testimony and support. But yeah, that has not been. Some of the discussion on 2012 has been taking positions out that have been in the zones. 457 is where the zone money comes, the 457 fund. I'm learning a little bit more every day. And there's about 19 or 20 positions in that fund that they're talking to pull out and put that in the department's budget. Thus, hopefully, and we'll get a little bit into this too, allowing approximately, I can't remember off the top of my head, 19 million, something like that, to be used for equity in the zones, maybe, for positions, those funds. Bob, did you have, I noticed you popped out here.
All I would add on that is I could see that going the opposite direction we wanted there. I could see state taking their ball and going home then and potentially embedding a state IT resource within a zone. And that would lose a lot of the flexibility that you currently have working with CAS here, especially as a single county zone. That could work out really nicely for some of our smaller, more rural areas, but I think that would be a drastic downgrade for our zone staff here.
One thing, when you're still out here, you reached out to some of the other single county only zones. Can you share a little bit about, my understanding, those single county only zones don't have the infrastructure that we have.
Yep, so to give you perspective there, we can use, for example, Grand Forks. They are, probably close to our size here. They're, decently close. They have a grand total of 3 people on their IT team for the entire county, and they outsource a lot of information. A large amount of this already to the state of North Dakota. So for some of those, it's made great sense for them to be able to outsource directly, and they have not invested in local providers like this. Cass County, we went the other direction. We invested locally, we maintain locally, which makes it a very difficult shift off in many cases.
Thanks.
Thank you. I just have really just a quick question related to all of the bills. Right now, as written, would you say basically Cass County is in position where they would support each bill as written? Knowing that they're not perfect, but, support oppose is usually what they ask you when you come testify. And if there is some opposition, it's just a matter of what's the strategy as it crosses over, because it might be too late with committee work, but.
Right, now, those ones listed there, I would say we'd support. I mean, the testimony for the indigent burial one, 2139, brought that forward, and I know there's a little subcommittee meeting with some of the funeral directors, so that I brought that forward about cremation, and they're talking about that. So, as far as the zone cleanup bill, I'm fairly comfortable with that, especially, and then 1091, the foster care. I think all of those, for the most part, are supportive. Of course, the big budget bill, 2012, there are some things in there. And it's not necessarily, I'm new to this game, the law, but maybe how it impacts us. One of those things, we've talked about recruitment and the time frame and all of that. We've talked about that. I do have a little jot on my director's report about equity, and I wanted to bring that up because there are, earlier I shared with you towards the end of 2022, brought a proposal for internal equity here at the zone. And at that time, that was not supported by the department. So, we move forward with retention bonuses as our avenue available for us. But I put a little paragraph in my director's report about equity and compensation. And the reason we weren't able to move forward with that is because we're waiting on the comp and equity study, which was supposed to be done during the interim. It's still not done. My understanding, it's supposed to be done mid-February and presented to Human Services Committee. But it's creating a challenge here at Cass County for retention and recruitment. To be able to recruit, it's like I've shared before, it does hit me in the gut. We can offer our salary ranges up to the midpoint. And we've gone back and looked at, for example, one of our positions and the average over the last 10 years of where the average and then the min hiring and the max hiring, and we're having to offer to get people in because we need people in the seats per se. We're having to offer at very close to what people that have been here. And that equity is so important to retain staff. So that's the area. Yes, it's not necessarily a law, but I think the awareness and how it's impacting larger zones. I have a map here. We're about 175,000 people in Cass County. The other counties, single counties, aren't even 100,000, 70,000 in Grand Forks County. We're not comparing apples to apples. So when I'm saying I want to be competitive, and I also want to retain the staff, and they should be, it's a catch-22 we're in. That's the area, and I'm not sure how to describe that, but that's the story or the need. Once that comp and equity study comes out, I mean, it's like a big unknown. I'm not sure what that's going to say. It might help a zone in in Trail
Gail,
County.
can I, this is
but-
Michelle, can I comment on
Yep.
that? I really understand the urgency with which you await that study. And Carrie may recall this and others as well, but there was a similar study done in around 2011, 2012 at the state government, and it showed some significant inequities at the time. And as we all know, the legislature sets the budget, and the budget was insufficient to close that gap. So it acted as a, and of course I wasn't there at the time, but when I was there, 2016 to 2020, that study was already 7 or 8 years old, but its memory was very, very strong. And, the gap wasn't closed then, and any gap revealed through this study, I'd be willing to bet will not be closed either. So just a word of caution, just because the completion of the study does not mean that action will be taken to address the gap. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that, Michelle. I guess maybe I'm not explaining it well to the reason we're given, we're seeing that internally here, administration, like it's a struggle to be able to answer that, but we're not able to move anything forward compensation-wise because we get the pushback that we're waiting for the study. And
I see.
what you said is exactly what I'm afraid of. The study is going to come, and that's going to take another 2 years. I just, so any guidance, I guess, as an advisory board, any input or guidance?
I think that's a really good question, Gail. And, the labor market today is different than the last time that study was done. It's different than ever. And many of us that have been in the workforce for decades upon decades can recall other times when there have been tight pinches in specific industries like IT or, social work or what have you. But today's environment is much different in terms of the wage pressure. I think the next several months are going to be really revealing when it comes to what happens with, recession, unemployment, et cetera. Gary, why in the heck do those job numbers keep going up? If you can explain that would be great. But anyway, Gail, back to your question. Just pressure, education, real stories, real numbers, exit interviews that show people leaving for increased pay, those are some of the things I can think of, but as uniform an effort as possible, because I have got to imagine, we're seeing in the private sector, we're seeing astronomical pay differences from company to company. And I have got to imagine that the gap between public and private sector is very, very significant, probably more significant than it's ever been.
Right. So that's one area. And I think that also relates a little bit to, and we've talked about this, the timeliness of being able to hire. And we do have, they'll provide a little recruitment update, but we put together a mock calendar and shared it out a little bit. Really from a candidate applies for a job, the position's open, applies for a job, it can take us, in a good, it might not start for another month and a half, 2 months. We're probably at the 3rd month by the time we go through the process. Carrie's probably we have a two-week posting, we wait for the roster, we interviews, we, go through that FTE process and all of that. In our present environment here in Cass County, that's too long. because then somebody else has applied, they've also applied for 3 other jobs at Sanford or wherever, and they can move very quickly. So that coupled with some internal inequity is really a talking point.
Couple thoughts on that. So you're saying it takes probably 3 months to get someone hired?
Well, in the picture, okay, we post it, it's open for 14 days. The roster we get, once it closes, probably within 4 days, we get the roster. So that's, we're halfway through a month.
Does it have to be 14 days?
It doesn't have to be, but,
How about having a standing, because let's just take EWs for all, keep it out there, and then every 7 days get a roster and go through an interview cycle like that. I know that at job service, I don't have to do mine for 14 days. They can just be out there for
Right.
7 days, and I ask
but we
for-
still have to close that. You can't keep,
isn't there like a way to just re-up it then right away?
We can. There are some things that could be done. We cannot keep a constant opening.
which I think,
The HHS system doesn't allow us to do that. We're trying to be methodical and strategic in the timing of our postings, as well as when we're interviewing, when we're hosting, and we're kind of working through that process, so that we can do it as quickly as we can and allocate our resources appropriately as well, to be able to meet all the interview needs that we have for all the departments.
but
Yeah,
I
it
know
can
we've lost people, they've started, because
be somewhere else.
they've started someplace else.
Correct.
So, yeah,
So
Rick?
it's kind of a question, maybe digging into the weeds a little bit here, but so you have these rosters, say it is 7 days. But then you have to evaluate the applicants to that roster by that roster.
Correct.
And then you have the next 7 days.
Correct.
And so you'd have to be interviewing them constantly,
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
And versus having the open, you get a good candidate, you send them on, you bring them back. I know you
Yeah.
looked at that, but I mean, so that
Yeah.
the shorter you get, the more, hate to say it, but the more work it is for HR, because they're gonna be interviewing all week long.
And we have
I
multiple.
was gonna share the idea that we have with our county website careers page,
Mhm.
kind of a stopgap for that.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you want to speak to that?
Sure.
Sorry. I don't know that I can speak to it fully. Yeah.
Yep, just press the,
Just,
Samantha has been working with.
Samantha's key with our recruiting.
In trying to kind of have a happy medium of be able to meet candidates when they're available for looking for a posting, and also trying to bridge the gap between, okay, are we a county employee or are we a state employee? If they're looking at a Cass County job, why isn't it available on our website? So we're looking at revamping a couple things on our Cass County Human Service Zone's webpage. And we're hoping to be able to create just some language about those positions, the high-level departments that we have, that gives kind of an overview of the positions, and hopefully being able to create like a short form. So somebody could submit their information with their resume, and it would come to me or Heather, so at least we could start a dialogue. If we had a candidate that was interested, and had a time frame, maybe we could adjust a posting to meet them where they're at, or at least stay in communication to let them know when a job posting would be available, so that there's communication available, at least beyond just that roster being created.
I got one more comment on that, to your point too, is, God, in the business side, if we find a really good candidate, let's say, by day 3, if they're really a good candidate, we probably gotta have a job offer by day 4 at a minimum, or, the younger they are, the quicker they're gonna move, and if they have something better in the meantime with the job offer, by day 5,
Yep.
we're gonna lose 50% of the
Yep.
really good people.
Yeah.
And I know,
And we're
I'm
trying
talking
to,
acquired.
we're making offers. Our recruiting has gone, in the last year, we have a much better recruiting process, but it's still a little cumbersome and timely. I think, Tony, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was, and I'm following, listening to the conversation, I thought, these 3 or 4 points that we've just shared in the meeting here, this was talked about in December with, legislators for that breakfast meeting. So, I'm thinking out loud as we come close to the crossover break, and Robert, you're coordinating, the joint meeting with the city, with legislators during the crossover break. I think it's incumbent on us to have a conversation with Senator Hogan, Senator Judy Lee, Representative Strinden, and Senator Davison, who are really 4 legislators that are kind of in a driver's seat, whether it's ITD or the human service policy and or budget, to see where we're at. I mean, I'm hoping that we've made some progress in some of these discussions and, at a minimum, just legislative intent language in the Department of Human Service bill that thou shalt department allow human service zones to make decisions on hiring within 30 days, something to get people's attention. So, I'm hoping we can get a progress report that we've made some ground here in the first 6 weeks when we get together at the crossover point and then figure out what practical solutions we can get people's attention on the second half to actually make some tangible results. So just an observation as I'm listening to this that sounds like we got work to do because a lot of what we talked about in December is still in front of us without any real direction from any of the members. Am I missing that, Gail? I mean,
No, I think you're spot on. And I think it's thank you, Tony. I think it's, I'll just say, it's apples and oranges a little bit, and that's just the way it is. But if, in my head, if we could just have a posting with a preferred hire date, and then we can keep accepting applications, but we can start interviewing and offering off that, rather than a shortened time period, we just keep, because we know we have EWs, we have social work positions, we have some opening. It's different if I was in, not hiring, didn't have 25 openings. We might not have 25, but we have quite a few. Rick?
Thank you. Commissioner Grinberg, I was at the meeting with you as well, but it was, for me, listening and talking with the individuals there, it was very disappointing because it seemed to me, well, that's a policy issue. We don't get into policy issues. I mean, I don't know how many times I heard that during that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point in time, and I don't know how it works, you've been in that business, Tony, for much longer than I've never been at the legislative issue, but they keep referring back to that's policy. Well, who impacts policy if it's not the legislators? I'd be curious to know what that is.
Well, that's kind of the yin and yang of this business, and at the end of the day, and we got to be good partners with the department. I get that, we're all on the same page with that. But sometimes you got to have something that gets people's attention, and that could be just simple legislative intent language that directs, the department to follow this path, even though they have their own autonomy, so to speak. But if we're not going to get some attention here, we're just going to be chasing our tail.
Are you governed by HRMS then?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and there's no emergency hire kinds of situations that are.
We do have emergency temporary position options, and we have leveraged those as we are able. Yes.
So I'm just thinking out loud here. Can you keep those open and kind of as like a gateway to the full-time positions and promote them without going through the whole interview process? Like hire them under the pretense that things work out during the 6 months, you'll be moved into a full-time position?
No.
But if I may, but with that, these emergency temporary, they're not eligible for benefits, correct?
Correct.
So it's a good luck holding on to somebody for 6 months or 3 months or 2 months.
Correct.
We'd love to hire you, but you're not eligible for benefits.
Correct.
Yeah, it's kind of temporary positions don't
Yeah.
work out well, but, and so that's the only way you can hire someone in emergency is if it's temporary.
Emergency temp for 720, 740, 720.
Oh, really?
Is that a policy or is that a statute?
Good question. That's the rules we were told we need to follow, but I'm
From
not.
HMRS. Yes, probably. I know
The semantics
we
of
do
which
have
one.
to, there's another meeting in here at 2:00. So I appreciate the conversation, any guidance, but those are the kind of areas that I'm looking at.
Just a
Brian?
quick question, could we put together like a memo on that? Here's our 3 concerns. One is turnaround time, one is the ranges that we have to work in. And, maybe the top 3, and like Tony said, maybe we put it on paper that we can provide that to that group, oversight committee. I don't know, but
Yeah.
otherwise, we're kind of talking in circles too.
Yeah, maybe I'll work with Commissioner Grimberg, get some guidance, Carrie, anybody, and put something
What Michelle
together.
said was so true though, if
Yep.
you don't tell the story, they don't even think
Right.
it exists.
That's right.
Right. That's what, you know, I have great team members, and then we put together some kind of visuals that maybe tell that story a little bit, like here's a mock like hiring, you know, this is what it takes. And it might not impact the Agassiz Valleys or the small, because limited, those are good jobs, you know, and somebody will wait. We have a much different market here.
Absolutely.
I did want to give a little bit of time. We might not get to the program updates, but I wanted to give a little time to recruiting and personnel update, since it's kind of on the same wavelength. And we included a kind of a one-sheeter overview that we'll try to do monthly for every meeting. And if Heather, do you want to give that quick overview?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly explanatory. It's nice graphical representations. We're hiring at about the same rate they're leaving at this point, which kind of has been our steady. We listed the reasons for termination for those that have left so far in 2023, 2 of them retirement, 1 being more money, another being moving to another area. Kind of along the same vein of some of the offers we have made, one of them, some of the contributing factors of why they were declined was related to timeline. Some of it was element of holidays and some of those out of office pieces, as well as just taking the time and having to complete the steps that are necessary with reference checks and roster timing and all that. So currently upcoming hires, we have 2 for eligibility coming up and 1 for CPS. Those are in the works. And overall, 23 vacancies between the departments.
Just want to bring to your attention too, we continue to have eligibility worker supervisor positions that are very difficult to recruit for. And we had a resignation of a supervisor. So we are now looking for 3 supervisor positions. And in January, it posted and closed with no eligible candidates.
So if you have 3 openings, how many total are you supposed to have?
6
6.
Okay.
or
Yeah.
50%.
With redesign, we didn't get a chance to talk about redesign is going live on Monday, February 13th.
I think that is also contributing to your turnover.
Absolutely it is.
Yep.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Karen.
And then it's also going to contribute to your ability to attract, because those used to be human service jobs and now they're call center jobs. And so that's going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
I disagree.
We'll see. It will be interesting. Support working as one and support leveling the caseload, but next week will be interesting and beyond. Since we're up against time, I did have Matt and Rhonda come, but we will put that off towards next month's meeting to give a family services update. Any other order of business? If not, a motion to adjourn? Any motion?
So moved.
So moved. That's Michelle.
We'll take Michelle as a second. All in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Just got done. Yeah.